Okay. I guess let's go. Mitzvah Shchita, Mitzvah Kuf Mem Vov, VaMitzvah Ashesh VeArboim Umeya. We asked a lot of questions last week, and I'll ask the question again. We'll have to try to give some answers, and if we don't have answers, just say Tzorchim. He shetzivonu lishchait behema chaye v'yoif v'acha yochel b'solom. This v'acha yochel b'solom is very odd. What's it trying to tell you? Okay, we'll have to see, and let's just see what translation issues before. The Rambam over here clearly uses the word amal. So it means this is a clear command. We'll see later that there is a tshuva from the Rambam's great-grandson. Someone asked him why he says it's amal. Why doesn't he say that it's a shrana? So you see that this issue of amal and shrana is actually, an issue which was dealt with, okay, in general. Now, just this behema chayev v'oif, if you look in the Arabic, there's no source in the Arabic that we have, both in Xavier Oxford and also in Xavier Kapach, which would point in this direction. The translation of the word, it says, as it's in Kapach, it says al chivan, which is it means balchai or something like that, balchai. Okay. Now, just be aware, and this is an important thing. Okay, the important thing over here is that it's not only Kapach translated like that. It's not that you get the impression if you look in the tshuva from Rabbi Yeshua Nogid that was also his girsa there, because the way they translate the question, Loma Oma b'mitzvahs kuf mem vav hatzivui shnitztavinu b'shchitas balei chayim. So that's the original Arabic. That's what it seems to be. So the question is, what's going on at Ibn Tibbon? So my humble opinion, and maybe I'm wrong, but okay, my humble opinion, Ibn Tibbon was a creative translator, in the sense that he wanted to recreate the Rambam's thoughts. And what do I mean by that? Because you'll find many times that there is no edus, no remez in the Ksav Yad for something that he says, Ibn Tibbon. And however, you'll find the Minyan HaKotzer or the Protei Mitzvos. For example, over here, and we'll find other examples. My list isn't going to be exhaustive, because I think someday it will be, but at the moment it's not. So in Minyan HaKotzer, in Aseh Kuf Mem Vav, it says Lishchait Behema Chayev V'oif. You'll find this also in Reish Hagez and in Chomim, where the Rambam, Ibn Tibbon, will depart from the Ksav Yad and use the Minyan HaKotze as the basis for his translation, which is an amazing thing. And actually, it could be that's what Baal Chai means. Any living creature that is Mesa Me'aleho Nevela requires a shchita to be machshel achilosai. So Baal Chai doesn't mean chagovim and doesn't mean dogim because they don't require shchita. They're not nevela, but any Baal Chai, which I assume would be in nevela, requires a shchita. It says behema chaya v'oif. And I think there's no way out of this because we'll see in the mitzvah of Kisi Adam, that's the next one, Kuf Mem Zayin, he should tzivon l'chasei's dam chayev v'oif, there it's chayev v'oif, in the Ksav Yad, acha shenishchat, what do you mean acha shenishchat? If there's no chiv shchita, you can't say acha shenishchat. You can say acha sheshofach domo, it says in the Torah. But acha shenishchat, so it seems very clear that whatever the translation, what's going on here, the Rambam clearly in Sefer HaMitzvos is of the opinion, as he is in the Minyan HaKotzer, that a oath requires shchita min HaTorah. And this will also be supported. See, I see, what I'm trying to tell you, I'll tell you the support, but I think the issue over here is irrelevant. You know, whether Ram said it over here explicitly, Baal Chai certainly is a reference to oath. That's all I'm trying to tell you. So I'm not sure if the translation issue has any meaning except for just to have an exact rendition of what the Ram he wrote in Arabic. Because you look at the end of the mitzvah, Kashet Tzivisicho, Melamed Shenitztava Moshe al Kono the al Havoishet, the al Roiv Echod be Oif, al Roiv Shnayim bebehema. If Oif doesn't require shchita, you can't have a discussion in the mitzvah itself of Kashet Tzivisicho of how much you have to do with shchita. So that l'chayra is very clear. The interesting thing is, and that will have to, that's not the, I want to deal with this now, but it's an odd thing that even though the posik for the mitzvah is v'zavachta mibkocha u'mitzaynecha, so whatever it is, you're not going to limit it to a behema and sign, but it's going to be including oif and a chaya. And the question is, we'll have to see later how and why. Okay. So the clear answer to how and why is from Kashet Tzivisicha, because the pasuk says Zavach b'kolcha shatzivisicha, and it clearly says that it's oif. So the mitzvah shchita is also by oif. We'll have to understand what that means. But I think that's the clear pshat. And it's based on, since it's Sifri, and we pointed out the Ram's opinion is in many places that Stam Sifri is a Pirush Makubal. So if the Pirush Makubal from Moshe Rabbeinu clearly says, Atot, that the Zavach, the Kashevitzicho, and it's referring to oath, so the Torah says, the oral law and the Pirush Makubal that Moshe is given, that the pasuk says is a mitzvah shechita by oifes. Interesting is in Mishnah Torah that he seems to have a different approach. Because the Ram in Perek Aleph of Hilchos Shechita, Halacha Aleph, he says like this: Mitzvas Aseh sheyishchoit mi sheyirtze le'echol boso behema chay v'oif v'ach kach yochal shenema v'zavachta mibekolcho u'mitzaynecho v'nema b'chol balmum ach kashe ye'ochel es hatzvi v'es hayo holomarto shechay k'behema li'in shechita. Which is absent here. So the truth is, if it says Baal Chai, I'm not sure, how important it is to mention every case. But if it's Behema Chai V'Oif, it becomes a little bit odd. However, the proof for Oif, that a Shechita by Oif is very different, and it's based on a Hekesh Techaya. V'Oif Hu'oimer Asher Yotzu Tzeit Chaya, Oy Oif, V'Shofach Es Domoy, Melamed Sheshvichas Dam Oif, Kishvichas Dam Achaya. It says V'Shofach Domo by both. It's one V'Shofach Domo, it's the same. It's a Hekesh Kilu, the Pasuk says V'Shofach is Domo by both, and it's both the same. So the Ram learns that the Shechita, which is a whole different approach, not based on Kashet Tzivisicha. Now, what does the Rambam want? Shenitztavinu lishchoit behema chaya v'oif v'acha yochal mipsorim. Now, you understand yourself. The mitzvah v'acha yochal mipsorim, is there a mitzvah lechol mipsorim? That's ludicrous. There's no mitzvah le'echol mibsarim. So it means that the mitzvah should be a prelude to achilas basar. Okay? But the mitzvah is the shechita. So the question is, why is it important to tell us what he's going to do with the behema after the shechita? Let's say he does a shechita because he wants to do a shechita for sport. Is there a mitzvah shechita? So the truth is, I would have said, and what I thought to say, and I found Mefurish in Mishnah Torah, listen to the Lashon Hara Mishnah Torah in Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph. Mitzvas Aseh sheyishchoit mi sheyirtze lechol bosa behema chaya v'oif v'acha kach yochal. It's the rotzain of achilas bosa which predicates the mitzvah shechita. If the person has no reason or cheshet or taiva to eat bosa, there's no mitzvah shechita. Mitzvah sheyishchoit mi sheyirtze le'echol. So this becomes very interesting. And in fact, just a preview of the Rabbi Yeshua Nogid, when he asked the question, why is there a mitzvah shechita? Is there hechach for it, or what exactly it is? So his second answer is, machmas, he says, v'omru kivin shehechrach goram lekach nasit sivui shel chayva machmas she'ein ono yicholim lechol min achai ela be'emsol shchita. We can only eat through the agency of shchita. So it means a person who wants to eat has a hechrach to do a shchita. But l'chayr, then the wanting to eat is very important. So I don't know v'acha yochal, but the purpose of the shechita is for achila. And the Rambam has this similar lashon to this, the way he has here in Minyan HaMitzvos, in Minyan HaKotzer, lishchot bein v'chayav v'yoif v'acha kach yochal b'salam. And in the Protei HaMitzvos, the beginning of Hilchot Shechita, lishchot v'ach kach yochal. So this will be interesting. We'll talk a little bit about this, but I just want to go through Rabbi Yeshua Nogid first, and then I want to talk about the ramification of this. So the mitzvah is, if someone wants to eat basar, there's a mitzvah shechita. So let's go to Yeshua Nogid's question. The question is, Loma Oma b'mitzvahs kuf memvo v'atzivich navino b'shchitas b'alechayim hoyim n'oroi sheyoyma hachuka shechokach lonu. That's the Sharana. Machmas shehi mitzvah she'ena mechuyeves ad shenidaktek b'asiyasa. So what the point he's stressing is Sharana is not a chiyuv. So then he answers, Vatshuva, Zov zeh b'glal ha'hechrach lichlo bo shchitas kochim, Oma hatzivish nitztavinu. See, it's very strange. It basically means that shchitas chulin by itself would have been a sharana. But since the mitzvah includes also shchitas kochim, memela, it became an amal, a tzivui muchlot, because part of it certainly has a tzivui muchlot, and that's the shchitas kochim. This teretz, in my opinion, is amazing, okay? Because me ani, the Hachnis Roshi, Ram, his great-grandson or whatever, but this sounds to me that there's something over here which is not right, okay? Because if you know anything about Shurish Yud Beis, you know that the Ram clearly says that the Shechit of Oila and the Chatos is part of the mitzvah of Oila and Chatos. It's not, okay? He says, where would you the whole purpose of Shurish Beis, you shouldn't count each chelik of the Maisa Oila and the Maisa Chatos as a separate mitzvah, but you should count the conglomerate of the Maisa Chatos and the Maisa Oila. So to say that Shchitas Kochim and Shchitas Chulin is one mitzvah is diametrically opposed to everything which he said in Shurish Yud Beis. Okay, that's very odd. So I don't understand this teretz, to be frank with you. So we'll have to understand why the Ram quotes over here Shchitas Kochim as the mitzvah proceeds, but I would assume that it's not to tell us that Shchitas Kochim is part of the mitzvah. So in the second answer, he says, as I mentioned before, that the hechach is that you have to eat bosa. Kivit shehechach goram lekach nasa tzivui choiva machma she'enon yichol lechol min achai ele b'emso shchita. Now, the idea of choiv and rishus, the Rambam discussed in Mitzvahs, the Rambam discussed in the Rosbrochas, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Beis, Yesh Mitzvos Aseh, she'odom chayiv lehishtadil v'lirdof ad shi'aseh oisa, kegoin tefillin v'sukkah v'lulav v'shoifa v'eila nikol choiva. Lefi she'odom chayiv al kol ponim lasos, he's obligated, he has no way out. V'yesh mitzvah she'eno choiva ela doima le'rishus. It's similar to rishus. We're going mezuzah u'ma'akeh. She'ein odom chayiv lishkoin b'bayis hachayim mezuzah. He doesn't have to live in a house of chayim mezuzah ke'eshias mezuzah. El imrotza lishkoin kol yomov b'oil b'sfino yeshev. But if it's rotza lishkoin b'bayis, then he needs a mezuzah. But understand yourself, the rotzon over here is not the same rotzon. The rotzon by mezuzah of bayis is not the same rotzon over here, because if he has the rotzon to live in a house and he dreams about it, he doesn't dream in a house, not chayiv mezuzah. The machayiv mezuzah is living in the house, okay? Whereas in shchita, the rotzon for shchita, the chilu is machayiv. But you understand yourself, if he's living in the house, he's taka chayiv mezuzah. I don't understand that there should be a situation, if he wants to eat basa, he's chayiv. If he really wants to eat basa, and he can't eat basa, and he wants to put the basa in his mouth, it's a different type of idea of chiyuv. I would have opted to quote a passage from the Rambam and the Nevuchim. It's a very interesting passage, and he says like this in Chelek Gimel, Perek Mem Ches. He says, "V'omnom mitzvah shchita bebehema hi hechrochis." So he's clearly saying that you have to have it, okay? He doesn't explain, okay, hechrochis, which is very similar to the lashon that the idea of making it Ramah, which Rabbi Shua Nogid is introducing, and he says like this: Mipnei. Listen, now he's going into a discussion about food and eating. Okay, I'm sure certain elements of society would just love this Rambam over here, just because I don't know, because they love the Rambam because it fits in what they want. Mipnei shehamozin hativi livnei odom, the natural food for man, who min hazroim vatzimchen ba'aretz, plant-based foods, okay, plant-based foods, umibosa balachayim, okay, and the bosa balachayim. I'm not getting involved, and I can talk to you about this, and whether which meat and how meat is healthy, but that's really not our issue, okay? And if meat is not healthy, it's basically Elokim Boas Adam Yoshev Ve'Hein Bikshu Cheshbonos Rabim, which I explained by Arichos. But the natural food of man, okay, natural food of man is plant food, plant-based foods, and bosachai. Interesting, he doesn't talk about dairy foods. He talks about plant-based foods and bossa behema. So l'cheira, that's very good. Then you have the hechach, because then man is fulfilling. He says, and he ends the line. Vatev shebabosa hu ma shehuta lana lachila. Kilo is something special about the bosa, which is huta bachila, which I can also discuss, but that's not for us now, because that's not what we're dealing with. V'zeh ma shelo yisupak boi reife. A doctor would never have any doubt about this. Okay. So then it's very good that now I just want to tell you another thing. So this is the hechrach, okay? So the hechrach is to fulfill man's natural health needs or whatever it is. So he needs bosa. Now I think basically, if I were asked, I would say the issue is of the idea of shrana. I don't understand the question. Okay? Shrana is basically when there's a parsha in the Torah, there's religious legislation in the Torah without any tzivui, hafos nedorim of the Av or the Baal or the mitzvahs of Tumah, that there's no clear command at all. Okay? So what we do is we come to conclusion that there's a what I call a tzivui hamishtama, a assumed or command which you can infer, or an implicit command from the text. Okay? Because the Torah says this is a legislation, it's an implicit command. Okay? So in Mela, that's a shrana, because there's no word in the Torah which points to a command. However, if there is a tzivui, and the issue is it a reshus, or what type of tzivui it is and how it is, that's either it is an amal and a mitzvah, it's not an amal. Because the idea of shrine, I don't think really is meaningful in terms of shechita. That's what I would have said. We only find, at least that I saw in the Rambam, in Hafos Nedorim, all the mitzvahs tumah, some of the issues of tahara, where there's no explicit command. So you have a shrana. Or at the mitzvahs, the end of the Mitzvas Aseh, Shem Echinam, Shem Esacha, there's no command. But if there's an issue of a Shem Echinam, Shem Esacha, he's supposed to act according to the religious legislation in the Torah. And that's the mitzvah, but that's a shrana. In fact, the Rambam calls even a forest the Dorim a tzivur, a amar and a shrana, because after the religious legislation, the conclusion is that what? That there's an implicit command to do it, and that becomes an amar. So it's it's like a two-stage process to make it do a mitzvah. First, you look at religious legislation. If it's there, it means the Torah wants to do it. And if the Torah wants to do it, there's an implicit command, which you can call a shrana. Now, once we said that the mitzvah is based on the want, the desire to eat meat, so the question you should ask yourself, who is obligated in the mitzvah? Who is the mitzvah on? So the person who wants to eat, not the sheikhet. And then I would say, when the Gemara Pesachim, Adav Zayin and Beis, when it says Meisvei, Boch HaSheket Yishad B'Mitzvos V'Tzivon Al HaShchita, Hosam Nami Heichi Nema, Lishchoy Loisagya Delav Ihu Shochad. He doesn't have to be sheifet. So I would assume that's the Bailim who wants to eat. And the sheikhet himself is Kilu representative, I don't know what it is, of the Bailim to help him fulfill his taivas, his desire to eat meat. But again, it's dependent upon the rotzen of the Bailim. So that's what he says. And that is something like, that's certainly Mishnah Torah, depends on the rotzen. She'ein on Yechol, Rabbi Yehoshua Nochi, she'ein on Yechol lechol bosam nachai ele be'emsal hashchita. So the hechach is the rotzen and the need to eat bosa. It has nothing to do with the sheikhet. So then it becomes a very interesting thing. Because when a sheikhet makes a bracha, he's making a bracha on the mitzvah. Okay? So I would only ask the following question, and maybe I'm missing it, okay? If the sheikhet is doing a shechita for an individual that he knows wants to eat meat, okay, and I don't know if you need bias at that point, but he's doing a shechita for a person who wants to eat meat, there's a clear individual and there's a clear shechita. So I have no problems. Okay. However, I think everyone would agree with me. If the sheikhet is doing a shechita for sport, okay, and he makes a bracha, no, he has in mind to do the mitzvah, okay? But if there's no desire, he's going to put it in the trash can, okay? So he didn't do any mitzvah. Is a mitzvah to do with sheikhet a Baal Chai if it's not for the purpose of achila? Okay. I hope you'd agree with me on that. So the next question I ask you is, there are no oichlim over here now that have asked the sheikhet to act, but they may sprout up, after his shechita is put on the market. Okay? That's considered a rotzen bailim. There's no rotzen bailim. I don't know how you get started. I'm just very confused of how the sheikhet, who's in mass production, whether it's an empire, whatever it is, because, they want to supply to the mass market, and we don't know who they are and what they are, that to say that there's a mitzvah shechita, that to me might be a little bit, need a little explanation. Now, next. I'm not, I'm not talking halacha ma'aseh. I'm just asking, I'm trying to interpret the words here. Now, there's something even, I think, very interesting. Because after he says, Shetzivonu lishchot behema chaye v'oif v'acha yochel b'soram, then he has another line. שלא, ושלא יהיה להן היתר אלא בשחיטה. They should only have a heter b'shchita. So what does that mean? So l'cheira, he means that there's an Mitzvas Aseh, that if you don't do shchita, you can't eat it, because he just said before that the purpose of shchita is for achila. Is yishchot mishoytz lecho yichlocho b'sor lishchot behemachai v'oif v'acha yochal b'sor. So he inverts it and says that if you want to eat without shchita, there's an isa. Ushalo yiyeh lehen hete ela b'shchita levad. This is odd because we don't understand what the place in Minyan HaMitzvos of this. We know the Ram Shita is lava bo mechal aseh if you have an issue. And the Chazal said it's a lava bo mechal aseh. We know that's an aseh because michlal lav at the shomei hein. But if we're ready to accept that there is a mitzvah without question, why should he mention in Minyan HaMitzvos there's an isa aseh here? I just don't get it. See, if we would know the Isa Aseh is a lava bo mechal aseh, so you can prove it's an aseh if you had a suffix about it. But that's not what he's doing because he doesn't in any way prove that it's an aseh based on this. So it's very confusing what he wants from this. However, what you see from this is very similar to the Ravid and the Ramban who claim that shchita is an Isa Aseh. However, the Ram says that it's not only an Isa Aseh, there is a Mitzvah Aseh. And the Ravid and maybe the Ramban over the opinion, it's only an Isa Aseh. Comes the Ravid and Minyan HaKotzer on the mitzvah of shchita, lishchol behemachai v'oif v'achi yochel b'soron. So the Ravid says, v'achi yochel b'soron, Om Avrom, ze ein lo tam, v'ulai lava bo mechal aseh aseh. That if you want to eat basa, you can't eat basa without shchita. It's an isa aseh. The Ramban also seems to say this in Shiur Aleph. V'im toimal, sheroi limnoison mitzvah mipnei sheho eruv atzmo yikol mitzvah midivreim. Shahari onu mevochim olav hashekel shel mitzvah mitzvahnu al mitzvahs eruv. So you can use the bracha at the moment he's asking, suggesting a question. Every time you have bracha, it's a mitzvah. V'chein netilas yadayim. If there's bracha, hashekel shel mitzvah mitzvahnu netilas yadayim, means there's a mitzvah netilas yadayim. Teda v'taskil, Ramban says, she'ein zeh etzel ba'al lochas gedolos mitzvah shetimne lefi she'ein odom mitzuva la'asoisa eruv or shelo la'asoisa. There's no mitzvah to do it. There ain't no klal b'kum v'asei. There's no kum v'asei to make an eruv. V'chein netilas yadayim ein mitzvah so b'chiyuv klal v'leitilu chachamim ala odom sheyitol yodov klal v'lecho v'anoitel yodov asor pa'amim b'yoyim v'oichel ein lezeh mitzvah yosem mizeh. That's that person. That's the question. You know, he told me a bracha is one thing, but the question: the person who has 10 sudas, is he more of a tzaddik that a person has one or none? We don't know such a thing. That's what the netilas yadayim. Okay. Avol elu hete ha'isa. Erev and netilas yadayim are hete the isa. The isa of eating without Netilas Yadayim, and the Isa of carrying without an Erev. Okay? And that's why the Rav Kvega, in his quote discussion in Shulchan Aruch, what he quotes says an Oinei is be'emes chaye to be Netilas Yadayim if he wants to eat bread. He can eat the bread without a bracha. He doesn't taste die without a bracha, but there's an Isa of eating without Netilas Yadayim. And the Netilas Matir. Avol elu heter Isa hein. Doime lemitzvos hashchita. Sheniktiknu bo nami. Vitzvonu ala shchita. V'diktiku bo leima lishchoy. He doesn't say about Ihu. Lo sagye to lo shochet. There's no obligation to shochet. The shchita is only to be matir the Isa. Two gisos in the Gemara. The elu ukiyetz ben lava bo mechlal aseh the ikun hu alav shenema bohen ki inyan kol tzipo tehera tochlo, and it means if it's not a tzipo tehera, it should not be tochlo. V'heich yakpid abal lochas doyle she'im the mitzvah kazu midivrei seifrim v'hu eino moina kiyetze bo min atera. Ki ein eitz abaloch zedoles bo b'minyan Mitzvas Aseh elo mitchen kuvaseh shasiyason mitzvah leinu. It has to be proactive in a mitzvah, but sitting back and not violating an Isa is not a mitzvah. Avo shehein bois miklech sheve al taseh v'ein b'shviyasas mitzvah elo o b'asiyason einon bois loy b'cheshbon elo im noimu b'lav Shebohen yimne belavim v'hu lo imona shchita. So he doesn't count shchita because the lav, it's just a negative thing. There's no kiyud, there's no kumvaseh. So chayra then the bracha and shchita is to be matir the Isa. Okay, so it doesn't have to have an achila. So I don't have any problem according to Ramban why the sheikhah can make a bracha. Interesting is like this. We'll see the Ramban has another sheet in Chumash, and we'll come to it. Let's just go work on the Rambam first, and then we'll get to the Ramban. So the Rambam over here is saying that there is an Isa Aseh, but it's not only an Isa Aseh, there's also a Mitzvah Aseh. And the bracha is the Mitzvah Aseh. Not like the Ramban. The interesting thing is, he's ready to develop it over here, the idea of the Isa Aseh, but Mishnah Torah, we don't find it. In Perek Aleph, Aleph, certainly. Unless you say, this is how the Ram learns Pshat, Be'im B'chayeh B'cheskes Isa Imedis. Because the Ram Perek Aleph, Yud Gimel of Shchita, Kol Be'im B'chayeh B'cheskes Isa Imedis, Ad Shivod De Bevadai Shenishchato, Shchita Kshera. And without it, maybe it's an Isa Aseh. Like Teisim Beitzach of him with Be'echam Aleph, the Ritzbo, L'cheini Uli, the Chazok, the Cheskes Isa, Rotzaloi, B'cheskes Shloi Nishchato, Ad Shivod Lecho, Umishum Isa, She'eno Zavucha, the Rachmon Omar, Tizbach V'yochalto, Shchot Vacho. This is what we have. So the Ram might also have an Isa Aseh. It's not a reason for bracha, and it's not to the exclusion of a mitzvah. You'll find also the Rambam in the Nevuchim has an Isa. in Chele Gimel Perek Mem Ches. The sequel of the discussion before, Mitzvah Shchita, Behemi Mechreches, when he talks about the Kiyum, the Kumvaseh of Shchita, which we mentioned before, but he has another line after that. The Osa Sheyane, the Torah prohibits Sheyane Oisam B'Shchita Ra'ah, to afflict harm and pain. It means harm, it's pain on the behemoth. And that's a shchita ra'ah. V'loi b'nechira. V'loi yachtech mehem eva min achai. So it's an amazing thing over here. There's an Isa shchita, which the chayr is rooted in Tza'ar Ba'alei, but it's an Mitzvas Aseh of shchita. You find a similar thing in Ramban. Ramban Chumash, first of all, the Ramban counts Shchita in Minyan, even though in Cherish Aleph, he says in Mitzvas Aseh. And how do we know it counts in Minyan? When he's Masalik the mitzvahs, he's Masalik Mitzvah Hey, Mitzvah Zayin, Pei Hey, Tzadi Hey at Kuf Ches, Yudal Dini Atuma, Umitzvahs Kuf Mem Beis. Okay. And Kuf Nun. So here, Kuf Mem Vov is in. So maybe the pshat is the Ramban counts Mitzvas Aseh. Like, for example, he counts the Mitzvas Aseh of the Mitzvah Schor on Shvius. However, so then, this is where you have it. But he adds another line. He adds something else, a Chumash, which may be very different, which sounds very similar to the Rambam and the Meir. The Ramban in Bereshis, Perek Aleph, Posik Chavtes, V'im kol zeh, lo nosan lohem horishus b'nefesh, v'oso lohem evim min achai to ben noyach, v'hoisif lanu, to us the Jews, b'mitzvahs lesser kol dom, mi b'nei shuhu maimed lenefesh, ki dichsiv ki nefesh kol boso domoi b'nafshoy hu, v'yomad b'nei Yisrael dam kol boso lo yiserchu ki nefesh kol boso domoi hu, ki hite aguf b'chai sheino medaber acha misa loy hanefesh atzmo. V'zeh tam hashchita ומה שאומוצא בלחיים דרייסה. וזוהי ביחסנו שמבורך השקר ישונה במצווסו וציבור על השחיטה. So l'chei, what he's saying is an amazing thing. That the kiyum of the Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim somehow is the kiyum shchita. Correct? Which sounds similar to the Rambam in Mo Nevuchim. The question is, if I had accepted this, I would have said that Tza'ar Ba'alei Chaim is the Isa. And that's the impression that I get from the Mo Nevuchim, because that's what he's asking. He says it's also Shiane Oisam. Okay. However, one can make a very nice case from the Talmud that the kilu is the kiyum, and not to prevent tsar from Baal Chaim. It's a Gemara Mefanin in Shabbos, Kuf Chav Chesma Beis. Meisvei behema shenoflo la'amos hamayim oiselos parnosa b'makoimo. B'shvil sheloi tomus parnosa in kol mekistus loi kasha. Ho diefshe b'parnosa. What lo efshe b'parnosa? If it's impossible that you should have a way out, you'll have to put kol mekistus. Eshe prosa in v'loi maybe kol mekistus. Umaniach mitach tachteho. I frek the Gemara vo kamavato klime chonoi. Sovavato klime chono drabonon. Sar balechaim deraisa. V'osi deraisa v'dochi drabonon. Mean the sar balechaim v'dochi. Did you ever hear in all your days that there should be a dechia, then Isa is a deiche? The deiche is a mitzvah. So what does it mean? It's very clear in the Ramban, very different. It sounds the same as the Rambam, but the Ramban is a kiyum. And the Rambam is an Isa. So, but however, the Isa in the Meira is an Isa of sound. Independent of whether you want to eat or don't want to eat from the behemoth. The Isa in Sefer HaMItzvos is not sound, but it's to eat without shechita. It's a very different thing. The Rambam in Minyan HaMitzvos and the Rambam in the Meira are not expressing the same idea, at least. Now, so let's go on. For Amor Yisrael, I just want to answer some of the questions. I spent the last few minutes last week to answer the questions. So didn't think you had the question. I gave you a whole week. So you certainly, you can work on it. For Amor Yisrael, v'zavachta v'kolcho, u'mitzaincho, v'goyme ka'asher tzivisicho. So I'm very careful to quote Kasher Tzivisicha. V'loshen Sifri, v'zovachta ma mukdoshin b'shchita, af chulin b'shchita. Kasher Tzivisicha, malamed shenitztava Moshe al hakona, or some giso, גרגרת, על רשת, ועל רב אחד באף, ועל רב שניים בבהמה. וכבר הסבירו משפטי מצווה זו, וכל דקדוקר במסכת המיוחדת לו, כלומר מסכת חולין. It's called שחיטת חולין. Okay, now, here, v'zavachta ma mukdoshin b'shchita af chulin b'shchita. So we pointed out that the interpretation of Rabbi Yeshua Nogid is very odd, because you can't say the Rambam wants to say that shchitas kochim is included in the mitzvah, because in Shurish Yud Beis it's very clear that it's not so. So what does he want? Why is the Rambam quote this part of the Sifri over here? So I would have suggested Ma Mukdoshim B'Shchita is to bring a raya that Shchita's Chulin is a mitzvah. Nothing to do, but Shchita's Kochim, that's not the place over here. It means the same way Shchita's Kochim is a mitzvah, but not this mitzvah. And the Torah says, V'zavachto, V'shochato. Here, the Torah has the same type of lashon Ma v'zavachta ma mukdoshim b'shchita af chulin b'shchita. And the same way the Rambam learned that shchita in kochim is a mitzvah, shchita in chulin is also this a tzivui in a mitzvah. Okay. So that's very nice. And it could be, so then it's really what the Ram's doing over here is quoting the Sifri to answer the kasha that Yehushua Nogit filled. How do you know there's a mitzvah? That's the Sifri says the same way that the Shchitas Kochim is a mitzvah and it's Vizavachta, whatever, Shechata, and here also the same things. It's Mamish Gvaldik. And maybe, since the Ram Shita is that Bosa Taiva was also, you had to bring Shlomim, and then it was Huta, and that's the mitzvah Shchita. So it means the same way that there was a mitzvah of Shchitas Chulin in the Azor L'Shem Kochim, Bizman, the Isa Bosa Taiva. Similarly, after the Heta Bosa Taiva, it's a mitzvah. That's what he's trying. He's equating the two. That's very nice. And the Ram clearly says that the Shchita of a Bosa Taiva in Mishkan is a mitzvah. That's what he sees to say towards the end of Shiur Shlishi, if you look there. But it's only mitzvah huashah. Now, so what he says like this. He says like this. He says, "Ki elu kula mitzvahs lefi shah, v'loy hatzivu shnitztavinu shenakriv kol behema shenirtze lechu mimena shlomim, ki zeh tziva b'midbar levad." The Bosa Taiva that should be a korban shlomim is only in midbar. V'hu amrei ve'evium Lashem amr b'sifro ve'evium zo Mitzvas Aseh. Avul hi b'midbar levad, kamo shebeya b'mishnah Torah hete Bosa Taiva l'deres v'amar b'chol avos nafshecha teichol bosa. So maybe that's it, maybe not. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, I think he's certainly trying to prove that there's a mitzvah shchita from this. Ramban in Dvorim Perek Yud Beis Pasuk Chaf Aleph v'nei mitchila tzivo sheyeh kol ma shehem oichlin shlomim v'hem shchutim k'mishpar hakarbonos v'ata k'shebo lahate bosa achulin oma v'zavachta mibekorcha b'tzoincha kashet tzivisicha b'yoisem karbonos v'teichal oisam chulin b'chol avas nafshecha lo yimeshiatirum chulin b'chol mokim ובלבד שיהיו זבוכים כאשר ציוו מתחילה ביוסם כולם קורבנות. The tzivui of Shchitas Chulin is similar to the tzivui of Shchitas Kochim. V'zehu pshutei shel mikra, ze al anochain. And then the Ramban says, V'shem Rabbeinu niskavnu b'zeh ki she'omu b'sifri kashet tzivisicha. Ma kochim b'shchita, af chulin b'shchita. So this is mamish gewaldik, okay? The only problem is the Ramban says the source of the Sifri is kashet tzivisicha, okay? The Ram is quoting the source of the mitzvah, is not kasher vitzicha, but it's from Vizovachta. Mitzvah to finish this next week, the end of the Sefer, and pick up the next mitzvah. I'm sorry I took the whole time, but there's a lot here, and I apologize.